When running our Python code, we received this output down here in the terminal. This output is the API response we received, and as we learned in this module, to get a response, we have to send a request first. In this request, we have to define what type of information, what question, what prompt in the end we want to send to the API. Now the whole management of this request, so to say, is defined inside our completion variable, specifically inside this create function. This function contains different so-called parameters, like model and messages in here, and these parameters configure the request. So one of the parameters we have to define to send the request is the model parameter. We talked about this on the slide already. In our case, we use the GPT 3.5 Turbo model. We could also use GPT-4 instead, for example, or other models, but keep in mind that depending on the endpoint, chat completion or completion, for example, only specific models are supported. Besides the model parameter, we also have this messages parameter. Messages, so plural here, will understand this in a few minutes. For the moment, we can just analyze the messages parameter, which contains a so-called list, a Python list, and this list then contains a so-called dictionary. Now we won't dive too deep into Python and programming in this module, but the idea of such lists and such dictionaries is to store information which can then be accessed afterwards. And the list here allows us to store one single, in this case, or multiple dictionaries. So this part here in the curly braces is one single dictionary, and the dictionary always contains so-called key and value pairs. So the key here is role and the value is user. For the second key value pair inside this dictionary, we have content, and content here is just hello. Now what this means in simple words is that we want to send the following message to ChatGPT when sending our request. Our role is the role of the user, so we are the person that wants to interact with the API. And the content, the second key here, we want to send to the API is simply hello. If we would change this from hello to a question, like, for example, what is the capital of France? And now rerun our Python file. We get back the capital of France is Paris. So therefore, with the user role in here and the content key, we can define what the user wants to ask the API. Now to make this a bit more interactive, instead of hard coding the user input, we can just add a dedicated variable for this user input that allows the user to directly ask the question or write down the instruction in the terminal. For this, we'll just create a user input variable and set it equal to input. Input here is a Python function, a predefined Python function, which could just say add your prompt in here. Now we add a space, and with this we can replace this hard-coded value for the content key with user input. By now rerunning our code, we get add your prompt, and now we could ask what is Python, for example, and by hitting enter we get back the answer from the API. So this is how we send our request in a very simple form. Before we have a closer look at the answer, at the response we get, I want to explore a few more core parameters we can add to our request.